I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. This meeting's being recorded and televised by the local cable company. Is there a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'd like a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public forum, now is the time for anybody to speak if they have something to say that's not on the agenda, about something that's not on the agenda. Yes?
Speak now or just say that I would like to speak?
You can speak now. As long as you don't take a long time.
Would it be better if I came to the next meeting?
It might be better.
Okay.
It might be better, Jake. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, regarding the dog licensing and the fines, I just wanted to say that, like, it goes from on the billboard to getting a thing saying that if you don't appear in 21 days, you're gonna go to court. I was thinking maybe it could be easier if you sent out either a reminder or they get the records from the vets on the rabies shots. Perhaps they could find out if the dog is passed before they send out something like that. It's hard enough when you lose a pet, but then you get this in the mail. It's kind of harsh.
Okay, I understand. Frank? you
Yes, we
refer to that?
actually discussed that earlier today. In July, the town clerk mails a notice to all dog owners of record that have not renewed their registration. In the last sentence in that, it's a postcard, normal postcard size, says if your dog is no longer in Whitman, please contact the town clerk, and it gives a number. The sheer volume of registered and unregistered dogs makes it impractical to do a series of letter writing. The statute is clear on its surface that all dogs are supposed to be licensed on July 1st, and there's a permissive period to do that. And we actually do not start assessing charges until the 1st of September, at which point a notice of failure to register, and if the records indicate an expired rabies license, failure to maintain rabies is sent out. It's all prescribed under the regulations governing animal control.
So there's no room or there's no way to ascertain whether dogs have passed unless they contact us that their dog has passed? I
Correct.
can understand exactly what you're saying.
Correct. There is no mechanism for us to know that a dog has died.
Except the recent,
Or
except
moved out of
that
town.
little card suggests that people ought to do that.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I got no card.
You didn't receive a card.
Right, and I had paid for her before, so it's not like they didn't have the information.
Can you deal with the town clerk between now and the next meeting?
I did. I mean, I went down and got the card, and anyone who's unlicensed as of, Lori can probably tell me the date they were mailed, because we provide them with the postage for it.
Should I get into trouble?
You know, it's like a tax bill. We mail 12,000 tax bills a year to people who own cars.
Jump right in.
And if somebody doesn't get it, we have no way of knowing. We simply have an unpaid bill. And I wish there was a more user-friendly, practical way to do it. But short of hiring someone to sit in there and do that, I don't have another answer. We used to have volunteers that would sit in the police station and make calls during July and August.
Right.
We don't have those anymore.
I'm sorry, could you stand up again? And your name is?
Ian Peasy?
Ann, is there a way that someone could talk to Ann about this?
Sure.
Someone she could talk to, someone she could call?
I'd be happy to meet with her and with the town clerk if she'd like.
I just think it's, well, as I said, kind of harsh. It seems there's
Yeah.
gotta be I mean, yeah, I understand the need for fines, I understand the whole process. But if people aren't getting necessarily the cards, then the first indication they have, if your dog is passed, at least, you're not thinking of a dog license. So the next thing you're getting is something saying, respond in 21 days, or, we're gonna take you to court. And that just seems absurd, but that's just me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sean, how long is your,
I can wait till the next meeting, that's fine.
okay, maybe you can get on the agenda for the next meeting. Okay. The subject is,
Municipal finance.
Municipal what?
okay, we're going to have a meeting next week. That meeting has been canceled because of tonight's meeting, which is off schedule, and we're going to set the October meeting schedule now. And the dates are going to be October 3rd and 17th, is that correct?
Yes.
3rd and 17th? Okay, vote to approve and sign, all business, vote to approve and sign the 2017-2020 DPW collective bargaining agreement.
So moved?
Is there a second? Frank, do you have anything you want to say?
This is an agreement that was negotiated and presented for approval, at least as to terms, at town meeting. Following that approval, we've now created a current contract which incorporates that agreement, extending the contract for 3 years. There were 2 copies here, which I will ask the board to sign.
Okay, there's been a motion.
Yep.
It's been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain. Animal control operations, Frank?
Last week, the Board of Health voted to assume responsibility for animal control. We're now coordinating some of the pieces that will be part of that, but I will need a vote of the Board of Selectmen to direct and authorize that animal control be placed under the supervision of the Board of Health.
Okay, sir.
So moved?
Second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Frank, is there a way that we could get a copy of the rules and regulations of the responsibility of the dog officers, please?
Well, we have job descriptions.
Right,
As
job
far as
descriptions, yeah.
rules and regulations go, those are things we need to
Yeah.
develop.
Just so it's clear on if in fact they're completing their jobs.
Anything else? All those in favor of the move? Aye. Now comes time to continue the disciplinary hearing to consider allegations regarding the alcoholic beverage license issued to O'Toole's Pub on the premises located at 24 Rainer Avenue. We started this a couple of weeks ago. We saw in executive session, we saw a copy of a partial copy of a videotape. And then at that time, it was decided that there were some people that needed to be officially notified that the meeting was taking place, just to preserve their rights, so that they would know that there was an open meeting that was going to be held, and that they might be, a reasonable person might be able to assume who they are, even though we're not going to be using their names during this discussion. So we postponed it until today, and thank you for being here again. To set the framework for this, what I'd like to do is to have the police chief quickly summarize the original letter to the selectmen that caused us to have this hearing in the first place. It's going to talk about some events that happened on January 6, 2017. There are a number of specific violations of our our town's rules and regulations as far as alcoholic beverage sales are concerned in the town of Whitman. And after we've gone through that, and hopefully it will be brief because you all have all the paperwork. We've all seen all the paperwork, and then we can ask you if you have anything that you would like to have us think about while we're deliberating upon what we ought to do about the situation. Does that make any sense?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask, so I was under the impression that Attorney Tobin was going to call witnesses. I was going to get that opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses. I would have the opportunity to call my witnesses, and Attorney Tobin would be able to cross-examine those witnesses. That was my understanding of how this hearing would go.
Our witnesses are present this evening. If you have any questions you want to ask any of those witnesses, they're present.
Okay, so you want me to call?
Excuse me?
You want me to call
If
your
you
witnesses?
feel right, because I think that, speaking with the chair of this committee, it's the understanding that all of the evidence that is going to be relied upon by the board has been submitted to the board. Copies of that evidence has been provided to you and your client. The witnesses who have produced this evidence are here and available to you this evening. And there has been at least two complete summaries of all of the events of January 6, 2017. And upon your request, there was a further identification of what those facts were and what the potential findings of violations by this board may consist of. So we could certainly review the contents of the notice that the board has provided to you, but I think that it may be best if you have any information or evidence you want to present to the board, either as direct evidence or rebuttal evidence. This hearing may be better served using that type of format, but I'm perfectly happy, again, to review the contents of the supplemental notice that lays out specifically all the facts and the potential findings, if that is your preference.
I'm just referring to Mr. Linham's letter to Mr. O'Toole, March 31st, 2017, where it says, please be advised that you have the right to be present at the Board of Selectmen's disciplinary hearing to cross-examine witnesses and to offer evidence.
True.
So I thought this was going to be a hearing where you're going to call your witnesses, and I was going to have an opportunity to cross-examine them. If you're not going to call them, I'm going to ask the questions anyways. That's okay by you?
That's, sure.
Okay, that's fine.
Then actually,
Unless the chair-
can we,
Go ahead.
I hate to use legal terminology, but can we stipulate to what the chief was probably going to say then? Because we've all seen all of that. And you've seen that.
Yes.
So maybe a way to simplify this is if you have some people that you would like to speak to, ask questions to before the board,
Sure.
it might be better to do it that way.
Could I make one note?
Sure.
At our last, the first night of this hearing, it was stipulated that the chief of the Whitman Fire Department Rescue was not necessary
Right.
because his report was stipulated as part of the record. And speaking with Attorney Flanagan a few minutes ago, he offered a second stipulation, and that is that there was only one phone call made relative to this incident on the night of the incident, and that phone call was made by a patron and not a staff member of O'Toole's Pub.
Right.
That is one of the facts that is relied upon extensively for purposes of moving for discipline, and unless Attorney Flanagan objects, it's my understanding that that will be an established fact. That is the reason why the deputy chief is here tonight. in order to establish that fact if necessary.
Okay.
So with the leave of the board, and unless Attorney Flanagan has any specific questions for Deputy Chief,
I don't.
then he could be released.
Oh, you do
Stipulate
have
to
questions,
that.
ma'am? Okay. Do you have an order on which you want to speak to these people?
I was.
You must
I
have a
believe Chief
problem.
Benton's first, so.
Okay.
If he just wants to get the summary, and then I can ask him a few questions, that's fine.
And again, I'm happy if it is your preference to review what the allegations are and the underlying facts.
It'd be my preference for you to do that, yes.
Okay. Well,
Let the chief do that first.
why don't we hear from the chief first?
So you want me to just summarize from
Sure.
my letter?
And your department's investigation, please.
So I sent the board a letter dated February 23rd. And in it, I indicate that on January 6th, at approximately 8:54 p.m., our department, along with Whitman Fire and Rescue, responded to O'Toole's Pub, located at 24 Rayner Avenue, for a disturbance call. Reflected in our records in-house computer is 17-160. From department records, it was determined that the calling party was a patron of O'Toole's, and all records checked indicated that that was the only call that came in, and that was straight to the police department, not through 911 Holbrook. The investigation determined that two male parties got into a dispute over spilled beer. The interaction escalated from yelling to pushing, and in its finale ended with one male party smashing a glass beer mug against the face of another male party several times. At one point, the parties were separated for a period of time, but were allowed time and opportunity to re-engage and to renew their verbal altercation, which resulted in the physical altercation. The incident occurred over a period of several minutes. There was no management present at the time of the incident, only a cook and a bartender. It is important to note that bar patrons were compelled to intervene for the purpose of attempting to maintain and later restore peace between the parties. Whitman Fire and Rescue transported one male party who had suffered serious injuries to his head and face to the Brockton Hospital. The suspect male party was arrested at the scene and charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, two with a blunt object, a glass beer mug. The male party that was arrested had a large amount of blood on his neck, face, covering the front top portion of his shirt from his neck and chest. It was determined that this was the blood of the victim and not the suspect. The victim's blood was all strewn about the floor of the bar and bar back area on the beer coolers. Detective Campbell completed the follow-up investigation to this incident. Plymouth County BCI responded to the scene, and also there was video footage that was seized as evidence, as well as pictures. On Tuesday, February 7th, at approximately 5:25 p.m., I met with Mr. Thomas O'Toole in my office to discuss the incident that took place on January 6th. Mr. O'Toole told me that he was on his way to the pub from Worcester and he was running late due to the traffic. He explained that prior to his arrival at the club, his wife got a call from Nicole McInnes, the bartender, informing his wife of a fight that had taken place, requesting that she come to the pub. Michelle O'Toole arrived at the pub a short time later. Mr. O'Toole arrived at the pub a short time after Mrs. O'Toole. I asked Mr. O'Toole who the manager was for the evening, and he informed me that he was. But as he explained earlier, he was running late due to traffic. I asked Mr. O'Toole if he had a staff book for patrons that acted inappropriately. Mr. O'Toole indicated to me on March 19th, 2014, that he was going to maintain a staff logbook for patrons that acted inappropriately so that management could take action against them. Mr. O'Toole informed me that no names have been entered in the book for causing problems since 2014. He did go on to explain, however, that the two people involved in the incident of January 6, 2017, although not in the book, have been told not to come back to the pub. He further stated that all employees have been told that both participants in the January 6th incident are barred from the pub. And then I went on, based on my investigation, I have determined that O'Toole's has committed infractions which include, but are not limited to, and I cite 7 infractions in the letter. And then also, I do note in there that O'Toole's Pub also failed to comply with representations that Mr. O'Toole had made to me as chief on or about March 19, 2014, regarding corrective measures that were to be taken to ensure safety and security of patrons and staff, including but not limited to failure to maintain a staff logbook for patrons that act inappropriately, and a failure to have doormen in safety green shirts mark staff on weekend nights.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chief Ben. Good evening.
Good evening.
You and I and Attorney Tobin and Mr. O'Toole sat in front of the ABCC for quite a few hearings for everyone. And we talked, the ABCC talked about foreseeability when there was a fight. And you remember that conversation with the ABCC and Mr. O'Toole?
I know that we had them, I know.
Okay. Well, in terms of, you watched the video in this case, correct?
I had.
And in the video, it's fair to say that the video shows somebody coming into a picture pretty aggressively, starting a fight with a person, and the fight ensues. Is that correct?
What I saw was a verbal altercation. Somebody goes to the bathroom and then they come out and then somebody gets whacked in the head.
Okay, so let me back you up there. You saw a verbal altercation between two
There was
parties?
a person that went into the bathroom, came out of the bathroom, and then smashed somebody in the head with a mug.
Did you see in the video the person going into the bathroom?
I saw them walk that way towards the bathroom and come out.
Okay, all right. And was there anything in the video that showed that out aggressively was speaking to the person who was hit with the beer mug? Was there anything in the video that you saw where there were any interaction between those two parties?
You know, I thought that there was an interaction earlier.
Okay. I mean, we're all doing it by memory, and the video speaks for itself. The selectmen have seen the video. Do you recall from the video that it appeared that the parties were packing up, so to speak, putting their coats on, getting ready to leave prior to the individual coming out of the bathroom? Do you recall that in the
Yeah, it
video?
looked like people milling around, you know.
Putting their coats on, packing up.
I didn't, they might have been. I mean, the video shows what it shows.
Sure, absolutely, okay. The reason I ask is because we talk about foreseeability. Was this assault foreseeable to O'Toole's staff? Could they prevented it in any way? Your letter dated February 23rd, 2017, in the 4th paragraph, the longer paragraph in that letter, and this is the point of, at one point, halfway down, the parties separated for a period of time, but were allowed time and opportunity to re-engage and to renew their verbal altercation, which resulted into physical altercation. So that's what I'm getting at. Do you have any evidence before the board that that happened?
But yeah, so it was indicated through our investigation that obviously this started verbally. Then a person was allowed to go to the bathroom instead of being escorted outside. So by them going to the bathroom, instead of just being separated and leaving at that point, that's what I mean by they were allowed to re-engage.
Okay, it's fair to say that you weren't there during this,
No,
and it's fair to say none of your officers were.
no.
And this is probably a better question for me to ask, maybe Detective Campbell, who did the investigation, or maybe some of your other officers, correct?
You can ask you.
That's fair?
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of Mr. O'Toole himself, has he always been cooperative with you and your department?
He has.
And was he cooperative that night and his staff when your officers came in to investigate the crime?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I wasn't there,
Okay.
but certainly he did come and meet with me to discuss the incident that happened. So it wasn't like he didn't, you know, we made contact and he came in. I mean, it wasn't like I had to chase him.
Okay. Did any of your officers tell you about his cooperation that night in terms of, like, Detective Campbell? He sat with Detective Campbell and reviewed the surveillance tape. Is that correct?
I know that they went through the tape, and probably more importantly, I know nobody told me that he didn't cooperate. I think if he didn't, I would have known that. So.
That's fair. That's fair. has there ever been a time when Mr. O'Toole hasn't been cooperative with your staff or yourself?
He's always, come in and spoken, with me, agreed to make some changes in the past and stuff. I don't have intimate details of all the interactions that he's had. You probably have to ask the other officers. I can only speak to my direct dealings.
Certainly, certainly. You spoke about a staff logbook in your letter. That was not a mandate for O'Toole's Pub. That was a suggestion on March 19th.
Yeah, that was something that he had indicated to me that he was going to implement. That's correct. It wasn't anything that we wrote out and signed on, no.
Okay.
Something that he just said that he was going to do.
And he does have that staff logbook, correct? He told you he does have it?
He has it, he said, no, but there's no names in it.
Okay. And there hasn't been any incidences that you guys have had to get involved with since the last time we were before the board,
That
notwithstanding this incident we're talking about today?
that I know of, no.
Okay. And you indicate in your letter, in your testimony about a doorman and wearing green shirts that say staff on that. That was another agreed upon thing from that March 14th meeting, is that correct?
Yep.
Do you recall Mr. O'Toole saying that the reason he would have a doorman is if he had entertainment? And not that he would have a doorman every day of the week or even on weekends?
Yeah, no, I didn't. He did later explain to me that was the reason, though, that he had said, and what he told me he did is he just wiped out the live entertainment.
Okay, all right, so,
But I didn't hear that part of it, that it was just gonna be because of live entertainment. So, but he told me later that, no, the reason was that for that purpose, if he had live entertainment, and he wiped it out.
so it's fair to say it could have been a misunderstanding on when he was supposed to have a doorman there.
Yeah, like I said, I definitely didn't understand it that way, but that's what he told me.
Okay, and would that be sufficient for your department if you had a doorman only for entertainment?
Well, the main thing is to keep the people there safe and to obviously be in compliance with, 13823.
Sure.
That's the main thing. So, whatever it takes to do that is certainly up to the owner of any establishment, and then if there's an issue, then we address it.
Okay. You indicated there wasn't a manager on duty, and the town has implemented some guidelines for having a manager. Who's the keeper of records of those forms and those records for managers?
Well, it would be the Board of Selectmen, it would be Town Administrator Lineham.
So any questions that I would have about who's the manager on duty, what form you fill out to be a manager, how you express that to the town would be from Mr. Lyman, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Chief, Attorney Foy asked you about the events on the night of January 6th, and he specifically cited a videotape that was shown for the Board of Selectmen at its last hearing date in this matter, correct?
Yes.
Have you seen that video?
I have, it was a while ago, but I've seen it.
And is that video a complete depiction of this incident?
No.
Okay. What does that video depict?
So the video that was recorded by Detective Campbell, and obviously he can speak better to this, but he went in there and recorded where it picked up, but it doesn't show, I guess, there was some time in between, according to him, that it didn't get. They weren't able to, they were gonna go back and try to get the video directly from the surveillance inside O'Toole's. And I did speak to Mr. O'Toole about that, and that video is gone. So, obviously, there's been some time, but Detective Campbell could speak better to that.
When did you speak to Mr. O'Toole?
Probably, I think it was maybe last week.
And you asked him for the remaining video?
I said, is there a way we could get in there and get the rest of the video? And he said that it's, long gone.
Did he explain why he no longer has in his possession videotape that depicts the incident?
I think it writes over, it writes over like, he told me the time, it rewrites over the,
Did you ask whether he made any independent recording of it?
no, I didn't.
You don't know why there is no complete video of the incident?
No.
What is your understanding of what part of the incident on January 6th is not depicted on video?
There was an altercation that the two had had prior to their, the mug being smashed off the person's head.
And in making that statement, what are you relying upon?
Detective Campbell.
And you're relying specifically upon Detective Campbell's report?
Yes.
And what did Detective Campbell report in terms of a second altercation between the parties that were involved that night?
I'd have to look at his report.
But is it your understanding that there were two altercations between the parties?
Yes.
And do you understand that there was an intervening period of time between the two
Yeah,
altercations?
I had indicated that in my letter to the board.
And do you know approximately what period of time elapsed between the first and the second altercation?
I don't know the exact time, I mean,
Do you know if the staff at O'Toole's Pub was aware of the first incident?
I don't.
Do you know if they did anything in response to the first altercation between the parties?
Well, like I said, the person was allowed to go to the bathroom, so, I mean, obviously they re-engaged after that. So.
And you know what, if anything, was done by the staff at O'Toole's Pub to prevent the second altercation?
It happened, and it wasn't, I mean, there was a person that was trying to walk, looked like, walk beside the person, trying to walk them out, who had gone off. Later, well, as I know, it's the cook who was trying to walk the person out.
Before or after the second altercation?
It was before the second, coming out of the bathroom, the person walked out ahead of whoever would have been there and went right at the person.
Any phone call was made in response to the first altercation to the police
No.
department? Do you know if any party was ejected from O'Toole's Pub as a result of the first altercation?
No.
Was there any security on hand in order to prevent either the first or the second altercation?
No.
Was there, in your opinion, as the police chief, a sufficient period of time for someone to have taken some sort of preventative action to prevent the second altercation from happening?
Yes.
And what could somebody have done?
Like I said before, if the person had just been told to leave, go to the bathroom, wherever, that separated the two and not allowed them, remove one person.
Was it, in your opinion, foreseeable or predictable that a second altercation would occur after the first altercation?
I think the trouble is that they were there. They were both there, so you had all the components there, and unfortunately, it happened. Whereas if you walk the person out the door, they're not there anymore. You can't have it.
And what else, if anything, could have been done to prevent the second altercation?
But, I mean, ideally, like I said, you have the person leave. I mean, short of that, somebody goes into the bathroom with them, I guess, and guides them out. I mean, to me, I think that the key is, one of the things that I thought was problematic is you had somebody who was trying to cook and at the same time try to, in fact, be a bouncer, remove somebody at the same time. It's kind of like a couple of things going on there.
And when you met with Mr. O'Toole, he indicated to you that he was not present during the altercation, correct?
Correct.
But he indicated to you that he was the designated manager that night, correct?
Yes.
And he indicated that he was running late?
Yes.
And what time of the day did this altercation occur at?
It was at 8:50, 8:54 p.m.
And what time of the day does O'Toole's Pub open for business?
I believe it's around 11:30, 12, but
So Mr. O'Toole was running about 9 hours late at the time of the altercation?
I guess.
Was Mr. O'Toole required to be there, or was a designated manager required to be there during all hours of operation?
Objection, we've covered this, and we're gonna speak to Mr. Lineham about it, because he's the keeper of records, and he's in charge of who's the manager and how you classify the manager. It's not Chief Benton. If not, I was gonna ask Chief Benton about that, but he deferred to Mr. Lineham about that, so I object to that question.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask it again. Was there a requirement that a manager be present at the time of this altercation?
According to the rules and regulations, yes.
And are you responsible for enforcing those rules and regulations?
Yeah, I mean, everything falls to the police department, certainly.
And so at the time of the altercation, O'Toole's pub was in violation of the requirement that a manager be present, correct?
Yes.
And in your opinion, as the police chief, was the presence of a manager possibly prevented these altercations from occurring?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have another person there. I think if Mr. O'Toole himself was there, it would have never happened. I don't think it would have ever happened. I can't speak to who he may designate as another manager, but if he was there himself, I don't think it would have happened, no.
And if somebody on the staff of O'Toole's pub had called the Whitman Police Department, was this preventable?
I'm sorry.
If someone on the staff of O'Toole's pub had called the Whitman Police
Well-
Department after it had been put on notice of the first altercation, was this preventable?
Objection, it's completely speculative.
In your opinion, was it preventable?
Well, I would have liked us to have been called ahead of time. I mean, I don't think it's gonna hurt to have us show up.
Was there any security of any sort present that night?
No.
You mentioned the logbook, and you had a discussion with Mr. O'Toole about the logbook. And is it your understanding that Mr. O'Toole keeps a logbook, but there are no entries in the logbook?
Yes.
Did Mr. O'Toole indicate to you that he had had any prior issues with the two participants in the altercation?
No. No, he hadn't.
Yes, he did.
If you look at your report to the board on page 2, you indicate that Mr. O'Toole explained that the two people involved in the incident on January 6th, although not in the book, had been told not to come back to the pub.
That's right.
Yeah, that night, right.
Does that reflect that there were any prior incidents involving him, or that only based upon the incident they were told not to come back?
Well, I mean, certainly he wasn't letting them back in after the incident, whether, you know, I think they were certainly known to him. I mean, whether he decided that they were gonna be out, I mean, obviously they were there that night, so they weren't out prior to.
You also referenced a series of representations that Mr. O'Toole had made to you in the context of prior licensing matters before this board.
Yes.
And that included a logbook and security shirts.
Yep.
Were there any other representations that you recall that were made to you
Yep.
that
He,
were, that were not in place on the night of this altercation?
No, the doorman, I mean, he
Was there any
did,
doorman present?
no,
There were no green shirts?
no.
Was there any panic button?
I haven't seen a panic button, although he did indicate that he was going to have one for police and fire. But I haven't been in there.
He's asking the same question.
Did you, and I may have missed it, do you know whether or not the hotel staff had notice of the first altercation?
I do not know.
That's all I have for the chief.
Okay, thank you.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Can I ask him about the rules and regulations? Chief, on page 3, the rules and regulations, I'm certainly not going to ask you to read the entire thing, but on the second paragraph, you could just read the first sentence in the second paragraph on page 3.
These the full, or is this just the part to 3?
Page 3, where it says 4 on-premises liquor licenses.
Okay. For on-premises liquor licensees, the manager must be on the premises the less of either 50% of the time for the premises, that the premises are open, or 40 hours per week during operational hours. For off-premises liquor licenses, the manager must be on premises at least 20 hours per week during operational hours. A written record book shall be kept which identifies the manager or principal representative in charge of each shift. The failure to have such information on file and current shall alone be sufficient cause for revocation or suspension of such a license.
Okay, so you indicated that Mr. O'Toole, so Mr. O'Toole's Pub is an on-premises liquor licensee, correct?
Yes.
And you indicated that Mr. O'Toole was not present, there was no manager on duty, and the manager is necessary to be on duty. But this says manager needs to be on duty 40 hours per week. So do you have any evidence to offer that Mr. O'Toole was not present in the O'Toole's Pub that week for less than 40 hours?
No.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Chief, for the purpose of completeness, could you refer to the preceding paragraph and read that provision that requires the manager to be present at all times, at all operational hours for O'Toole's Pub? So we have a complete record of exactly.
You want me to read the full C, the full letter
So we
C?
have a complete record as to what the rules and regulations actually require.
Letter
As opposed
C.
to some part thereof.
Okay. Letter C, supervision and presence of licensee. A duly authorized manager or principal representative of the licensee shall, at all times during which alcoholic beverages are being sold pursuant to the license of such establishment, and for the period extending until the departure of all patrons at closing, be present in the licensed premises, and shall be available to the licensing authority during all such times unless some other person similarly qualified, authorized, and satisfactory to the licensing authority, and whose authority to act in place of such manager or principal representative shall first have been certified to the licensing authority in the manner aforesaid, is present in the premises and is acting in the place of such manager or principal representative. The full-time residential address, business and home telephone numbers of said manager or representative must be on file with the licensing authority. The manager and/or principal representative shall be responsible for ensuring compliance with the town's rules and regulations, any conditions or restrictions upon such license, and other applicable laws or regulations with any failure of compliance attributable directly to the licensee.
So, again, at the risk of redundancy, who was the designated manager for O'Toole's Pub that night?
Thomas O'Toole.
Who, in a conversation with you, conceded that he was the manager that night?
Thomas O'Toole.
Was he in compliance with that provision of the town's rules and regulations
No,
at the time of the incident?
no.
And I didn't ask you before, but I may as well. What was the extent of the injury suffered as a result of this altercation?
He had lacerations to his head, his face. You know, obviously the trauma, I mean, I'm not a medical person,
Did he
but
require medical attention?
yes, he went to the hospital.
Was he transported by ambulance?
Yes,
And were there any arrests made?
yes,
And are there any pending criminal charges
yes.
against any of the involved parties?
Yeah, the suspect was placed under arrest and case is still ongoing. He was charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, to win a blunt object, a beer mug.
And based upon your review of your department's investigation, applicable laws and regulations, and the town's rules and regulations, do you think some form of discipline is warranted based upon the facts?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Chief, if we have a manager that has to be on the premises at all times, and then the next paragraph says the manager has to be there at least 40 hours per week, wouldn't you say that's vague and ambiguous?
I object.
Is this confusing at all?
That's
to
a
you,
statement,
Chief.
it's not a question.
Is this confusing at all to you, Chief?
Well, the way I read it is, it looks like you can maybe have like an assistant manager, but certainly the part that I get in the beginning is that, you know, the person has to be there. But yeah, Don, I mean, the other part, certainly, you know, if you read it, I guess, by itself before you read the first part, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But once you read the whole thing, it kind of goes together.
Is there a manager on duty at every establishment in Whitman as we speak today?
As far as I know,
Okay. So everybody has filled out the proper forms and designated a manager, and they're on that. There's the manager at every place in Whitman.
as far as I know, to be, you know, you know, given the rules and regulations, so, yeah.
And what kind of, excuse me, I'm sorry. What kind of enforcement do you do on that? Do you check on that?
So what we do is there's compliance checks, there's also compliance checks with the ABCC. And we don't go in and out of the liquor establishments. Other than that, you know, there's random checks like that, but we don't go unless there's a problem. If there's a problem, then we address it. So,
No more questions.
Thank you, Chief.
thank you.
If we're going to do it in this format, I suppose what makes most sense is, especially given the fact that there's some questions raised, I would like to call as the town witness Detective Campbell to clarify some issues.
Okay. That'll be fine.
Detective Campbell, good evening. Were you involved with an incident that occurred at O'Toole's Pub on January 6, 2017?
That was,
What was the extent of your involvement?
the cruises, the shift cruises were sent there. I went there to assist them. The call was an altercation occurring inside the bar.
Could you just keep up your voice
Sure.
a little bit? And so, at what time approximately did you arrive?
Probably at 9 p.m.
And what did you find upon arrival?
When I arrived,
And I'm just, as a general reminder, if you can refrain from identifying parties, other than suspect, victim, and position with O'Toole's Pub, that would be best.
Sure.
Thanks.
When I arrived, victim was outside. There's a seated, I think there's a large rock outside the front door, or a bench, I'm not sure what it is. Victim was seated on that bench. There was a male party with him, who was his friend, who turned out to be the party who actually called the Whitman police for a response. I spoke to that party briefly, the victim, and that person asked them what happened. They indicated that the party outside had been struck over the head with a beer mug, and that the person responsible was still inside. At that time, I knew that Officer Stokinger and Officer Young were inside O'Toole Pub already. I proceeded inside to them to speak to them. I wasn't sure if they had had a conversation with the victim outside or not. I spoke to them. When I got in there, they were speaking to the suspect, who was covered in blood. There was blood all over the bar area, all over the floor. There was, I think, an overturned bar stool. The broken beer mug was on the floor with the broken handle adjacent to it. And we proceeded to talk to the people inside to find out what happened.
And so, who did you speak with? Again, identifying them by, with their names if possible.
We spoke to the suspect and found out what had happened. I attempted to speak to several parties inside. All but one agreed to speak to me and tell me what she had seen. Everyone else had said they didn't see the altercation, or they were basically uncooperative as far as explaining what had happened.
So how many individuals, how many patrons were present at the time of your arrival, approximately?
I'd say, I think I said in my report, there were approximately 8 to 10 people in there.
And did you attempt to speak to all 8 or 10?
Probably not all 8 or 10. I'll say I attempted to speak to 3 or 4 of them. But when I spoke to them, those 3 or 4 individuals, they were in clusters of people, so I may have been talking to one person, but there were 2 other people standing with them.
And were they cooperative?
No. All but one.
And who was the cooperative party?
The cooperative party was a female in the bar. She was there, I believe, with her friends, not with either victim or suspect. She was with a group of people. She was the only one that gave her name, her address, her telephone number, and what she had seen and what she had done as far as the altercation went.
And what did the victim offer, if anything, to you that evening?
The victim,
Yes.
he just stated that he had been hit over the head with a beer mug, wasn't sure what the party's name was, I think he might have described him, and that he was still inside the bar.
And was he transported from the scene
Yes,
by ambulance?
yes.
Can you describe his injuries?
He had a pretty good laceration on the top of his head. He was covered in blood, so it was kind of hard to tell where it was coming from, but I know the top of his head and on his face he had some injuries.
And did you talk to a suspect?
Briefly.
And what, if anything, did the suspect offer to you?
He had stated that there was some kind of altercation between the 2 of them. He stated that he was in a headlock by the victim, and that he had swung the beer mug indiscriminately above his head to free himself from that.
And did you attempt to speak to any, what staff members were present when you arrived for O'Toole's bar?
The cook and the bartender.
Mr. O'Toole present?
No,
Was Mrs. O'Toole present?
no.
Did they arrive at some point during your investigation that evening?
Yes.
How long were you there before they arrived?
I would say I was there for 20 to 30 minutes before they had arrived.
And who arrived first?
Mrs. O'Toole.
And at what point did Mr. O'Toole arrive?
Probably 5 to 10 minutes after her.
And did you have a conversation with Mr. O'Toole at that time?
I did.
And what did he indicate?
He asked me what I needed. He was cooperative, asked me what I needed. I told him I wanted to see the videotape.
And of course, he had no facts to offer about the underlying altercations because he was not there, correct?
Correct.
And did you speak to any of the other staff members?
I don't think I spoke to the cook. I spoke to the bartender and asked if she had called Mr. O'Toole, if he was coming, if she had called him.
And do you have an understanding that the bartender called Mr. O'Toole to come to the bar?
Yes.
And do you know if the bartender also called Mrs. O'Toole for the purpose of having her come to the bar?
I'm not sure. The conversation I had was, is Tommy on his way? Is he coming? And she said, I spoke to him, he's on his way.
And what else did you do for the purposes of your investigation that night?
I asked Mr. O'Toole if I could review the videotape of the altercation.
And did you?
Yes.
And I think you heard earlier some discussion about the video that was seen by the Board of Selectmen at its last meeting. Are you familiar with that video?
Yes.
And how that video was shot?
I recorded that myself using my cell phone off of the computer monitor on his desk in his office.
And why did you do it in that format?
Just about every place I go that I have to get video, the person who owns the system doesn't know how to operate it, doesn't know how to download video. I certainly don't know how to do it, and I certainly don't want to do something that's gonna erase that video at that time.
So when you were there on the night of the incident, Mr. O'Toole did not have any ability to give you a copy of the video depicting the entire incident, correct?
Correct.
And so as a result, you took a video of it using your phone.
Right, I wanted to make sure that I at least got something on video that night, you know, that I could get, and then go, my intention was to go back and get the full video.
And did you ever go back?
I did not.
Why not?
Typically have to coordinate with Josh McNeil, the town IT director, and I don't know what happened between the two of us that week. Because that time we didn't meet up. I wasn't able to get with him.
Have you seen the video that the board saw at its last meeting?
Yes.
Is it a complete depiction of the events on January 6, 2017?
No, it's not.
What's missing?
Uh, the,
Well, let me rephrase that. Tell the board what you observed from start to finish on the videotape as it relates to this altercation.
Relates to the altercation, victim is there at the bar. The view of the video is from the back of the bar room, kind of by the bathroom door, by the kitchen door, facing out. Victim and the person who eventually called 911, called the police, to the left, along the side of the
Who
bar.
called the police without identifying?
A friend of the victim. So they're, I think they took a couple of women on the side of the bar. Suspect and his friends are at a pub table, a few feet behind them. The victim and his friend, they're kind of horsing around a little bit. I think one pushed the other one, horsing around. He bumps a table behind him. It spills I gotta keep suspect and victim going here. It spills the suspect's beer on the table or on the floor. Suspect confronts the two of them by the bar. What comes around, there's some conversation between the two of them.
Is it from the tape, does it appear as though they're arguing?
Yeah, they're, I don't know if they were hitting each other or pushing each other. They're close to each other. They're having words back and forth,
So they're nose to nose,
pretty much.
and they're arguing,
There's no audio on the tape, but they're talking to one another.
okay? And so what happens next?
They get separated by a couple of patrons. I think the people they're with separate them.
And is there any security present from the videotape?
No security present, from what I could see. There is an employee that I find out later is the cook who comes out and intervenes at that point.
And what does he do for purposes of intervening?
They're separated. Like I said, there's no audio on the tape, so it appears that they're separated. Suspect heads into the bathroom, or off camera, I assume he goes into the bathroom.
And what happens to the staff member or the cook from O'Toole's Pub that had intervened in the first altercation?
He's not on camera there at that point. Later, it's my understanding that he had returned to the kitchen to retrieve either a pizza or takeout food that victim had ordered prior to, I think he was waiting for a pizza or waiting for something.
And so is either patron at that point ejected from O'Toole's Pub?
No.
And is anything done to ensure that they are kept separate?
Not that I can see, no. Victim is still milling around next to the bar. He's putting his coat on with his friends.
And what happens next on the video?
Suspects and re-enters the picture of the video. There's words exchanged between the two of them. I believe the victim may have said something to him, but there's words exchanged between the two of them. Suspect approaches the victim. He's carrying a beer mug, pretty good sized beer mug in his left hand. As he approaches the victim, they have words. I think victim may put his hand up on the suspect. Suspect then switches that beer mug to his right hand, reaches out, grabs victim, pulls him towards him, and comes up over his head with the beer mug and smashes him over the head, and then the handle breaks off. He still has the handle in his hand. to punch the victim with the beer mug handle in his hand.
And how does this altercation end?
The cook reemerges on the scene and does what he can to get in there, and he ends up basically grabbing both of them. They end up by the beer cooler where he's trying to separate the two of them.
And is there anybody there to assist him from the side?
No, he got no assistance at all.
And so are the parties ultimately separated?
It ultimately separated. At that point, victim walks toward the front door. At this point, the female patron that I had talked to, she intervenes, walks toward the front door, and if I could back up, during this altercation, that's when the friend exits the bar. He's got a cell phone on, he's calling the police. So,
And then did you confirm that with the party who made the phone call? That-
yes,
And it was a patron?
yes,
And the phone call was made only after the second altercation?
correct,
And only after the victim had been bloodied with a beer mug, correct?
correct.
So what happens next according to the video?
So the victim goes out the front door, his friend, I believe, is already out there, or he may have come back in and then went back out. That female stands at the front door and does not allow victim or his friend to re-enter the bar. They come back up to the door, you can see them at the door. She does not allow them to re-enter the bar.
Was there any door staff?
No.
Okay.
And at that point, suspect is standing there, wiping blood off of himself, and at that point, the police arrive on scene.
Okay. And so, based upon what you witnessed in the video, was the first altercation, there was notice to the O'Toole staff that there had been a verbal, if not physical altercation, correct?
Yes.
Because the cook responded.
Right.
And what was the span of time between the first altercation and the second altercation that left the victim bloodied by a beer mug?
I would have to say there's 2 to 3 minutes. I mean, he's in the bathroom for a while.
Was there, in your opinion, based upon your viewing of the tape, was there sufficient time for O'Toole's Bob to have prevented that second altercation?
Yes.
What could they have done to prevent it?
I think that one of those bodies would have been escorted out of the bar after the first altercation.
If somebody had called the Whitman Police Department, could it have been prevented?
Absolutely.
If there had been a manager on the scene and present, could that second altercation, in your opinion, have been prevented?
A manager or somebody responsible for overseeing that type of activity in the bar room, yes.
If there had been security staff present, could that second incident have been prevented?
Yes.
Do you think that second altercation, based upon your viewing of the tape, was foreseeable or predictable?
Yes.
Why?
Just based upon the initial confrontation they had, there was no effort made to prevent anything else. They were separated, and then there was no
Was there
follow-up.
Was there any indication from the videotape that that first altercation had been resolved to the satisfaction of the two parties?
You can't tell by the videotape. He goes into the bathroom, he gets back out of the bathroom, and it starts up almost immediately.
Were you the arresting officer?
No,
Who was the arresting officer?
I believe it was Officer Bert Henderson.
Does your report indicate that you had some difficulties in capturing the video?
Yes,
Reading from your report, it says, due to technical difficulty, the video that I captured does not include the parties talking and horsing around and the victim pushing a party into a table. Is that your effort to capture the fact that the video is incomplete?
correct. I didn't know the video was incomplete until I got back to my office and to review it.
Your report says the event spans approximately 3 to 5 minutes. Is that approximately right?
Yes. I read my report, and I think I'm referring to the second altercation.
Second
I
altercation.
believe that if I'm reading my report correctly, I believe that's what I meant. was the-
And so,
But I don't
from
know.
the first altercation through the end of the second altercation, when there is a bear bug smashed over the victim's head and the parties wrestle and have to be separated, what's the entire span of this episode?
Well, the initial altercation is rather brief. He's in the bathroom for a couple minutes, and then like I said, I have in my report that it lasted, I believe, if you can refresh my memory, whatever I said in the report. I think I was referring to the second incident on that, but give or take,
Let me give you,
I have a,
do you, if you, yes, please, I prefer that you rely specifically upon your report.
yeah, I read this earlier, like I said, and when I read that line that I had written, the event spans approximately 3 to 5 minutes.
Yes.
I honestly, just minutes ago, was racking my brain trying to determine, was I talking about this lineup that I made as far as how the video plays, or the entire incident? So give or take the whole incident, from start to finish, from the initial one to the end, 5 to 7 minutes at most, 8 minutes, maybe 3 to 5. Like I said, as far as what I wrote in the report, I had that one statement. I'm trying to rack my brain to figure out what I meant by that.
But sufficient time for the second altercation to have been prevented.
Yes.
And was the first altercation within view and hearing distance of the bartenders who were working that night?
Objection, he could never answer that question.
What was the distance, per your review of the videotape, what was the distance between the bartenders and the first altercation?
About as far as me as a counselor. And the stools were right on the other, I mean, she is standing, in the second altercation, just prior to the second altercation, when the suspect is in the bathroom, the bartender is standing behind the bar, facing the victim. She turns her back on that group of people and has a conversation with the gentleman sitting on the other side of the bar. So she's right there.
And why do you think it's significant to note that she turned her back?
I just thought it was odd. There was just an altercation. One guy was sent to the bathroom. They're still milling around. My opinion at that time was the bartender's not even paying attention to what those people are doing.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Just on the video, at one point, the bartender does what appears to, looks like she picks up her cell phone, but then puts it back down when the cook is trying to separate the two people on top of the vehicle. I don't know if that's the point that she calls Mrs. O'Toole or texts Mrs. O'Toole or contacted them. I'm not sure what that was.
That's all I have at this point.
Thank you. Detective Campbell, you were not present during this altercation, were you?
No.
And you spoke to Mr. O'Toole that night of the altercation, correct?
Correct.
And he was extremely cooperative with you during this process?
After the fact, he's always been correct.
Always been cooperative? And so you sat with Mr. O'Toole and reviewed surveillance video that he provided, correct?
Correct.
And who else was present during the viewing of this videotape?
Officer Silver.
Okay. Is he available to testify today?
He's
Yes.
here.
He is, okay. So, in terms of watching the video, you testified that there was an individual, the victim, and another individual were horsing around. Can you describe that, what you saw in the video?
They're talking to one another. Kind of hard to describe, but they're talking to one another, standing facing each other, kind of jostling back and forth, getting around, and one kind of just pushes the other one away from
Who did the pushing, the victim or his friend?
the victim,
Where did the friend end up after the push?
bumping the table, the high table behind him.
Did it seem like it was harmless horseplay?
Yes.
And what table did they bump? A table that he was leaning on?
No, the table that the suspect was standing at.
Okay, so the suspect was standing, and was his beer, who was the suspect standing with in the video?
I don't know.
Was his beer on the table?
I don't know. I don't know if he was holding his beer at the table or the beer was on the table, but it spills on.
Okay. It spilled, did you see it spill on the suspect?
Yeah.
And where did it spill on? His chest,
I don't-
leg?
I don't know.
Okay. How do you know it spilled on?
I could see the beer mug.
You could see it? You could see wet clothing?
No, I could see the beer mug spill beer out of it.
Oh, it was in a mug, not a bottle?
I don't know. Like, whatever he was holding, he moved, it appeared he looked down, like something spilled on him.
Okay. And then the suspect, what did the suspect do at that point in time? The suspect, when I refer to the suspect, that's the person coming out of the bathroom and for
Right,
the
right.
testimony. What did the suspect do at that time?
He has a conversation with the friend who bumped the table, and then he comes around the
Well, let
table.
me back you up. So he has a conversation with the friend, so obviously there's no audio.
Right,
It appears that he's talking to the friend who bumped into the table.
yeah, appears there's a conversation going on.
Okay, and how close were they?
They were standing, facing one another from what I recall.
Facing one another? Did it look like there was an altercation on that video? It looked like it may have been a fight?
Not between the two of them, no, but then there's word.
Well, no, I'm between the two of them. So the person who bumped into the table and the suspect had beer, was upset.
Right.
He faced, you said, did they nose to nose? Like it looked like they were gonna fight or no?
The two of them weren't, no.
They weren't gonna fight.
The two of them were not.
And you basically testified that that initial altercation was rather brief, correct?
But that's not the
No,
incident
the
I'm talking
altercation I'm talking about. You talk about first altercation, second altercation. We're going the first. Let's go
No,
step by
you're
step.
talking about a conversation between the victim's friend and the suspect.
Okay.
When I said it was a brief altercation,
Okay.
I was talking about an altercation between the victim and the
Okay,
suspect.
so let's get to that.
I just
So
want to
you-
clarify who I'm talking about.
So that's fine. So you're talking to the suspect and the person who bumped his table, and they speak to each other. It appeared that they were speaking to each other.
Right.
And then what happened?
And then there's a confrontation between the victim, the ultimate victim, and the suspect.
Okay, so the suspect stops talking to the person who bumped the table, and he moves towards the victim?
I'm not exactly sure. There's a confrontation between the two of them.
In what way is there a confrontation?
They're
What
standing
happens?
nose to nose, and they have to be separated by other bodies in the bar.
Okay, so how long was that? You said, you indicated in your testimony
It was probably, well, when it ended when the cook came out of the kitchen.
Okay, so O'Toole's Pub employee came out of the kitchen and separated the two.
Right.
And there was a rather brief altercation, but there were no punches thrown, there was no pushing, it was just
From what I
words.
recall, there was some bumping between the two of them. I don't know if there was any fist thrown, but they were up against one another.
Well, you
and
didn't
they
say that in
had-
your testimony, now you're saying there was bumping? It was nose to nose or it was bumping, which one was it?
They were up against, I said earlier, I believe, that I didn't recall any fists being thrown,
Okay,
but they were up against one another and had to be separated by several people in the bar, including the cook.
including O'Toole's Pub's cook.
Right.
Was he the first one in the video to break it up?
No,
Oh, who was the first one?
I don't know.
Was it a female or a male?
I don't know.
Okay. Would you say it was 2 to 3 seconds?
No. If I had to put a time on it, I would probably say it was about 20 seconds.
20 seconds?
It was longer than 2 to 3 seconds.
Okay, so they sat nose to nose for 20 seconds and no one did anything about it, the two of them?
No, people were trying to, I don't know if you've ever been in a bar, people are there trying, all right, trying to get them apart and separate them. The cook comes out and separates them.
Okay, so
At that point.
after they're separated, where's the suspect go? Is he still in the video?
No, he goes off the video.
He goes off the video, okay. So now the video is just showing what?
The victim, who ultimately is the victim at that point, and his friends, they're standing around on the, like I said earlier, by the bar. Victim is putting his jacket on.
Does it appear that he's leaving?
He's getting ready to leave.
Does it appear that the people involved in this party are packing up to get ready to leave?
Yeah, and I learned later that they were waiting for something from the kitchen.
Okay, so they're waiting for someone in the kitchen and they're ready to leave. And then the next thing you see in the video is the suspect coming out of the bathroom.
Correct.
And that's the video that the selectmen have seen. saw.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And while you were watching the video with Mr. O'Toole and Officer Stokinger, you've reviewed the video, correct? And
Yes.
your voice is on the audio.
I don't believe my voice is on that audio at all.
Well, I'm just going to ask you, if you said this, did you say, "I'm surprised you got them to leave"? on the video?
I don't recall.
Do you recall Mr. O'Toole saying, "My guy did his job"?
Yes,
And do you recall you saying, "Yes"?
no. That's not my voice on that video. That's Officer Stokinger's voice.
That's Officer Stokage's
Correct.
voice. Okay, so do you recall?
I'm sitting
Officer-
there with my cell phone in front of my face. I'm not talking at all.
You're not talking at all?
At all.
I don't know whose voice it is, that's why I'm asking. All right, so do you recall hearing, I'm surprised you got them to leave?
When I'm videotaping it,
Yeah, do you recall hearing that? 'Cause that's
when
on
I'm
the video.
actually videotaping it, I don't hear any of that conversation.
Okay,
Because I'm ready to stop my phone, you
okay.
know, for video. I hear them having a conversation, but I don't hear, I hear what's being said when I review the videotape. I hear that conversation.
Okay. So in terms of my guy did his job, Mr. O'Toole said that, but you did hear that? You do recall him saying that?
No, that's why I clarified. I heard that on the video.
Okay, oh, okay, you heard it on the video,
Right,
you don't remember it at
I
the
knew they were
time.
talking.
Okay,
I was there video. You do it all the time. When I'm videotaping off a monitor like that,
sure.
I'm not talking at all. I
Fair to
don't
say
want
then
any-
that's Officer Stokage's voice, but there's only three of you guys.
It would have to be.
Okay. In the entire video you watched, you indicated your testimony is about 5 to 7 minutes, is that correct?
Like I said, in the report, I wrote the incident took that long. And like I said, when I reviewed the report, I was trying to figure out if I meant the entire incident or the video. I mean, watching the video, you see how long it takes to play, then I guess I could clarify my report a little better.
And you wrote a police report in this case?
Yes,
And you include all your important details in the police report?
yes.
How come that's not what your testimony today about the first altercation is not in this police report?
Sorry?
How come your testimony today of what you just talked about in the first altercation is not included in your police report?
I think a description of it, as it was relayed to me from the witness is in there. I think I say that altercation is not on the video.
I'm sorry?
I do put in there, I think I attribute it to the witness relaying to me what had happened prior to what I have on video. But
Okay.
it coincides with what I observed when I watched the video.
You have a video, you have a paragraph in your police report about the video due to technical difficulty. You don't talk about your testimony about the initial confrontation, except for the fact that it was putting his jacket on, returning from the men's room, and then the video begins just after the initial confrontation.
That's the question.
I asked the question.
You said the report doesn't reflect any reference to the initial confrontation, and then you just read from the report,
The report doesn't reflect your testimony today about that initial confrontation. You have a lot of testimony today about that today because you watched the video, but that's not in your police report.
Well, paragraph 4, I have in there what the female patron had relayed to me,
I got that.
okay?
My
That's
question
what
is
I
about
just
the video.
testified to.
My question is
That
about
is
the
what's on
video.
the video.
I'm sorry?
That is what's on the video, what I watched on the surveillance that's not on the video.
Okay.
If everyone's human, I failed to reiterate that paragraph again, but I do say the video capture does not include suspect and victim talking or messing around, and it does not include the initial confrontation.
Okay. What I'm saying is you don't get into detail in your police report about that initial confrontation, do you?
I would say not specifically at that paragraph, but in paragraph 4 I do, and I'll tell you that is what is on the video. I mean,
Paragraph 4.
I attribute it to the witness relaying that information to me, but I will stand here today and tell you that that is what's on the video, on the surveillance that's not on the video.
Okay. Okay. Nothing further.
Does the board have anything?
Pardon?
Does the board have anything, or you want to move to the next?
No, we can move to the next. Do you have somebody else you want to speak to?
Why don't we have Officer Stoninger provide some information? Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you please tell the board what involvement you had with the events of January 6, 2017 in O'Toole's Park?
Okay, the police department received a call about an altercation down at O'Toole's Pub. I responded. I was the officer in charge of the shift that evening.
Who made the phone call, do you know?
It was a male party that's known to me. I found out later. But I didn't answer the phone, so I didn't speak to him directly. Myself and I was training Officer Burns at the time. He was FTOing with me. He was new to the department within the last 2 months. So he was riding with me. We arrived at the scene down at Rayner Ave. Victim is, we found out later, is the victim sitting outside on the large rock they have outside. Got a large laceration on the left part of his skull. He's also got cuts on the left side of his face. This party's known to me. I told him, you know, we got an ambulance coming. You need to get checked out. There's a pretty bad cut. He seemed to not want to go to the ambulance initially, but after they showed up and started working on him, we realized, yeah, I need to go. So we did. That, while waiting for the ambulance to arrive, they told me that the party that had assaulted him was still inside the park.
Did the victim have any other conversation with you?
No,
So at this point, you enter the bar.
correct.
What do you find upon entering the bar?
If you don't know the establishment, when you come in the front door, the bar is essentially a horseshoe-shaped bar as you're looking at it. So there's a bar this way, and it goes down, and it kind of flares out at the very end of it. In the very far left corner of the bar, you can see there was blood on the floor, there was blood on the bar itself. There's a broken beer mug or beer stein on the floor. There was a couple stools knocked over, and looked like there was nothing else around. There was no chairs or any tables in that general area right there.
And did you speak, how many parties were present at the time you were at, approximately?
I'd say anywhere 12 to 15.
Okay. And how many staff members?
I saw a bartender behind the bar, and there was a gentleman that was coming out from the back room. He was pushing a mop. Looked like he was going to start cleaning up.
And did he identify himself to you at that point?
Not by name or anything, no.
But did you understand what his position with O'Toole's Pub was?
I didn't know what he did for the bar, but I mean, he worked there, unless he was just being nice and volunteering to mop up the floor as a patron. I doubt that.
Mr. O'Toole present?
No,
Was Mrs. O'Toole present?
no.
At some point during your visit that evening, did either Mr. O'Toole or Mrs. O'Toole appear?
Yes,
How long were you there before either party appeared?
about 20 minutes.
And who appeared first?
Mrs. O'Toole.
And do you know what caused her to appear at that time?
I have no idea why she showed up. She showed up. I had never met her before that evening.
And at what point did Mr. O'Toole?
About 5-10 minutes later.
So about 25 minutes after your appearance.
Give or take, yeah.
And how long were you there, if you know, or have an understanding, how long were you there after the incident occurred?
I think we were there for a little bit over an hour and 10 minutes maybe.
And at what point did you arrive after the altercation between parties?
I don't know how long it took for the phone call to get to us, but I mean, it was within 5 or 10 minutes, I would have to think.
So did you speak with anybody while you were there?
Yeah, I had encountered a gentleman in the bar who had blood all over his shirt.
The victim?
No.
I'm sorry.
This turned out to be the suspect.
The suspect, I'm sorry, that's right. And what was your conversation with the suspect?
I asked him what happened. He said he got into a fight and he smashed the guy over the head.
And the fight, to be clear, took place within the confines of O'Toole's Pub.
Yes.
Okay. And did he explain what happened or how it happened?
He explained what caused it. He just said he got into a fight and he hit the guy over the head.
And was that party arrested?
Yes, he was.
Who was the arresting officer?
Myself and Officer Patrick Burt Henderson placed him into custody at that point. Officer Burt Henderson returned him to the station to book him.
And did you speak to any other parties that evening?
Directly, no. I didn't speak to anybody else at the bar.
Did you speak to any of the patrons?
No.
What was the extent of the rest of your activities while at O'Toole's that night?
At that point, when Detective Campbell arrived, after Mrs. O'Toole arrived, she indicated that her husband was right behind her, and then he would be able to show the video of what had occurred. I just made sure that nobody touched any of the scene so that it could be properly photographed, and we had to make sure that it was properly cleaned up too.
And you mentioned that there was a person with a mop,
Yes,
and did you have any involvement or interaction with the person with the mop?
not directly, no.
Okay.
Except to tell him not to clean up anything until we told him to.
What was he cleaning up?
He hadn't cleaned up anything yet.
What was he intending to clean up?
I guess he's intending to clean up the broken glass and the blood on the floor.
And during your visit that evening, did you observe the videotape that Mr. O'Toole had that depicted the events of that night?
Yes,
And I trust you heard the earlier discussion about the video that the Board of Selectmen saw at its last meeting, correct?
correct.
Have you seen that video?
Yes,
Is that a complete video of the events that either led up to or involved the altercation between the two parties?
no.
What's missing from that video?
The initial altercation between the two parties.
So if you could, can you describe for the board what you observed from that video, from the beginning of this, I'll call it altercation, but it consisted of two separate altercations, correct?
Right.
If you could describe the events that began the second altercation and take us through that second altercation.
Okay. Well, like Detective Campbell said, the video shows a view from what would be the southwest corner of the room of the bar itself. So it's coming out from where the back room exits, from where you exit out the back room in the bathroom. It's facing towards the front door. And it's an angle so it includes the entire view, or most of the view. I'm sure there's some dead spots where you can't see certain things. The victim was against the bar with a male friend and a female friend. The suspect is over along this wall, which is parallel with, say, South Avenue. He's at stand-up tables, not anything that has a stool or anything around it, it's just a stand-up bar table. Okay? And
What's the approximate distance between the parties at the bar and the parties at the stand-up bar table?
can't be any more than 10 or 12 feet.
Okay.
So there is a couple tables there. So I don't know if it's one large group or maybe two groups of 2 or 3 people each at these tables. Right? And then the victim, I have to try to keep these all in the right order here. The victim is against the bar. He has a conversation, a little jostling, shoving match with his friend. And at one point, he shoves him to the point where he loses his balance, goes back, and bumps into the table, which causes, you can see the glasses move, beer to spill. At that point, the suspect confronts him about, hey, you just knocked over my beer, what's going on? So they got, they were talking to each other. You can see they were talking to each other.
Now, there was no audio on the tape, you're guessing what
No,
was...
I'm assuming that, when their mouths are moving, so I'm assuming that they're talking to each other. They're about an arm's length away from each other,
Okay.
having a conversation. At this point, the victim comes over and inserts himself into that conversation, whether he thought he was coming to the defense of his friend or what have you. At that point, the victim and the suspect get nose to nose, chest to chest, and start having a more heated conversation.
Is there physical contact? from what you
Yeah,
can
they bumps maybe, not any real shoves or anything like that, but they got in each other's faces.
see? And how far are they from the bartenders?
The bartender,
Bartender.
sorry, they can't be any more than 12 or 15 feet. It's kind of hard to be
Okay.
any more than that in the establishment. So their friends start to try to get them to separate, and they're not necessarily separating right away. The employee, what turns out to be the employee, comes out from the back room. He's got a black t-shirt on with white lettering on the back. That's what I remember seeing on the video.
Do you know
See-
what alerted him to the altercation?
I have no idea. I don't know if there was shouting going on or what have you. I don't know if he looked out. I don't know if there's a window there that he can look out. Maybe he saw it happening, or he just happened to be coming out of the back room at the time. That's possible.
Okay.
He came out, and the friends were keeping them separate. He went over, separated them. Both groups went back to the areas they were at. At that point, the eventual suspect walks out of view into, I assume, the bathroom, but I don't think he went anywhere else. That's where the men's room is, out in that direction. comes back out, picks up his beer from the bar, that's right there at the corner of the bar as you walk out, walked over, had it in his left hand, went up to have a discussion again with the victim. This is the suspect having this discussion. They start to have another verbal argument again, at which point the victim, hey, pushes him back, get away from me. He switches the beer stein from one hand to the other, and as the victim grabs him in a headlock, he reaches up like this and smashes him on the head with a bottle, twice.
Where's the O'Toole,
Not the bottle, I'm sorry, the mug.
where's the O'Toole's pub staff at this point?
Well, the bartender's behind the bar, and I didn't see the other male staff member.
And who's the, do you know what the other male staff member does for O'Toole's pub or was doing on the night of this incident?
I found out later that he was the cook,
Okay.
but I'm assuming he was cooking.
Was there any security staff on camera?
Not that I saw, no.
And Mr. O'Toole wasn't on camera.
No, not at this time.
And so what happens following that second physical altercation?
Well, that altercation moves along to the back corner of the bar, right in front of the camera. All right, so they're all the way over in the corner, almost to what, I don't know if it's still a side door, an emergency exit door, or whatever. They get separated. The friends of the victim, the male friend of the victim, who ended up being the caller, as well as they believe the friend of the suspect, get involved in trying to pull them apart. And at that point, the male employee of O'Toole's comes out and was able to grab the suspect in a bear hug and pull him as the victim was getting pulled in the other direction.
And who's pulling the victim in the other direction?
His friend and I believe another friend of the suspect, actually.
So patrons have to intervene in order to separate the parties.
Yes.
And is the male staff member who just described the same one who would intervene in the first altercation?
Yes.
And what was the span of time, per what you observed on the video, between the first altercation between the parties and the occurrence of the second altercation?
5, 6 minutes. No more than 7.
And it's your testimony that O'Toole's Pub had ample notice of the first altercation.
I would say so, yes.
They intervened, in fact, correct?
That's correct.
And does the video depict any effort by any staff member at O'Toole's Pub to make certain that the parties are separated?
No. Not after they were initially separated, no.
Does the video depict any effort by O'Toole's Pub staff to escort any or either of the two involved parties from the bar in order to avoid a second altercation?
No.
Based upon your viewing of the tape and your experience as a police officer, was the second altercation between these parties foreseeable or predictable?
I would think so, yes.
Why?
Well, they're still within extremely close proximity of each other. We're not talking about a large establishment where if somebody goes to the other side of the room, there's and there's a bar between them. You're talking about 2 male parties who are no more than 12 feet away from each other,
So
looking at each other, staring at each other.
So there was a clear risk that the first altercation would lead to a second altercation, in your opinion.
I would say so, yes.
And was it preventable?
I would say it would be, yes.
How was it preventable, in your opinion?
They had escorted one of the parties out, or both parties out, or had us come and escort them out. If they were no longer wanted in the bar, absolutely, we do that all the time.
If there had been security staff, was it preventable?
I can't imagine the security staff would let them stay after that, no.
And if there had been a manager present, was this preventable?
I would think so, in the same vein.
Do you recall Detective Campbell's videotaping of the video on his phone?
Yes.
Can you describe that process for the board?
Well, Mr. O'Toole has a computer monitor where you can call up the cameras, and he put it on the indicated camera, worked back to where the incident started, and Detective Campbell took his cellular phone and said, all right, I'm going to record this on this as well. And he started recording you know, he started playing the video.
Okay, why not simply make a copy of that email?
Objection.
Was there any discussion about you being able to obtain an actual copy of Mr. O'Toole?
I believe that Detective Campbell said he would like to get a copy of that.
Okay. And was it possible, were you party to any conversation where it was discussed getting a copy that evening?
I don't remember the exact conversation about it.
Okay.
I know he wanted one.
And have you viewed the videotape that was taken by Detective Campbell?
Yes,
And there are voices on the video?
that's correct.
Are any of the voices yours?
Yes,
Okay. And do you recall what, if anything, you said on the portion of the videotape that has been presented to the board?
I believe on the part where after the altercation had ended and the two parties the second time had been split up and the victim was actually taken outside, Mr. O'Toole stated that his guy did his job. I said, yeah.
What did you mean?
Well, what else was he gonna do? He's one guy. He's gonna, there's two guys fighting, he's one guy. He's not gonna be able to grab two guys and hold two guys off. He got one guy. He got one guy and that's what he did.
So do you mean to say he did the best he could?
He did what he could with what he had. I'm not sure it's the best he could, but he did what he could with what he had.
But what he did didn't prevent the second altercation, correct?
Well, that had already happened at that
It
point.
already happened.
Yeah.
So you meant he did the best he could separating the parties after they had already engaged in an altercation?
With the help that he got from the patrons, yeah, I would say that.
So it was a good effort.
It was an effort. He didn't ignore it, put it that way.
That's all I have unless the board, I will reserve the right to ask some further questions if necessary, but that's all I have at this point.
Do you have further questions?
I do. Officer Stokinger, in the video that Detective Campbell made, you indicated, I'm surprised you got them to leave. Was that a statement on the video?
Yeah, that's where it clearly showed in the video that the victim was trying to get back in the door, and there was a woman at the doorway preventing him from doing that.
I'm surprised you got them to leave. You were speaking to Mr. O'Toole, correct?
Yeah, but I meant his people.
His people. So who stopped who let them to leave?
Turns out it was the friend had dragged him out, and the female friend that was with him was the one that was standing in the doorway preventing him from coming back in.
So the video doesn't show the cook from O'Toole's pub getting involved immediately?
Immediately in what?
So the video,
Yes.
Detective Campbell's video, it's only 1 minute long,
Yeah.
doesn't show the cook from O'Toole's pub
I
getting
was
involved
talking about after they
immediately?
had been separated.
Well, you said this on that video, correct?
Yeah,
And it was 1 minute.
I know that.
Okay.
But that's on that video too, the part where he's taken out.
Right, so.
And that's what I was referring to.
Who are you referring to as you? I'm surprised you got them to leave. Who's you?
O'Toole's Pub.
Okay.
As,
So-
as an entity.
So it's fair to say that the cook,
No,
Was
it's
it-
not. The cook had nothing to do with it.
so you made a mistake on who it was?
No.
I still don't understand your statement.
I said I was surprised you got them to leave. In other words, I'm surprised it didn't go any further because the gentleman was trying to get back in and he didn't get back in.
Okay, well then Mr. O'Toole goes on, he says, my guy did his job, and you say yes.
Yeah,
So you agree that the cook from O'Toole's Pub did his job?
he did what he could, yeah.
And didn't you indicate he wasn't gonna stop that? Did you say that?
No, he wouldn't. Not by himself, he wouldn't.
Right, so, but he wasn't gonna stop that? That's what you
Not
said?
by himself, he
You
wouldn't.
said, no way.
Not by himself, exactly.
But we didn't say that, though. You said he wasn't gonna stop that. Was that your exact words?
Exactly.
Okay,
A
and
single
then you
man was
said-
not
then-
going to stop that.
Sir, my question is, was that your exact words? He wasn't
You
going
heard
to
the
stop
tape, sir?
that?
Yes, that's what I said.
I'm just asking you a question. You can
Yeah.
answer
Oh, I
it.
know what you said.
Did you
I
say
know what
no
you're
way?
asking. Yeah.
Did you say no way?
What part?
He wasn't gonna stop that. No way. Was that your
Exactly.
statement?
Exactly, because they're still there. The guy came out,
Okay.
they started the
In the
altercation.
initial altercation, you indicated that the cook from O'Toole's Pub intervened. Was that your testimony?
Yes.
And then you indicated that he didn't separate the parties?
No, I didn't say that.
What did you say?
I said that the parties were separated at that point
All right, so the cook from O'Toole's Pub did that,
with the other people that are involved, yeah.
but he was involved in that as well?
Yes, I said he was.
Okay, nothing further.
Just one follow-up. What's your understanding of the cook's responsibilities?
I have no idea what his responsibilities are outside of cooking.
Did you have an understanding when you made those comments, the cook's responsibilities also included keeping the peace at O'Toole's Pub?
I didn't even know he was a cook. At that point, I didn't find out till afterwards.
Okay. That's all I have.
You don't
I
have anybody else?
have Officer Bert Henderson, he's here, we may as well hear from him briefly.
Briefly?
So we can.
Do we have to hear the same thing over and over again?
He's on our witness list,
All right.
given the fact that, Attorney Flanagan, rightfully so, wants, or has some questions for the witnesses, we may as well put Officer Bert Henderson on and get his take on the evening, and then give Attorney Flanagan the opportunity to ask
All right.
questions.
If his testimony is going to be consistent with the testimony of the officers tonight, I don't think it's necessary. It's up to you.
So, why don't we
If he had something to add,
That's what I was going
if he
to
had something
propose.
to add,
Why
I'd
don't
like
we
to
bring
listen
him?
to it, but I don't need to hear.
Why don't we bring him up and ask him if he's got anything to add? If his answer is no,
All right.
then we
All
will
right.
release him as
Fine.
well. I would ask the Whitman Police Department witnesses to remain, because we may need them for purposes of rebutting any witness testimony.
Okay, fine.
So, Officer Bert Anderson, please. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I believe you have been here during the totality of the testimony
I have.
offered by the Whitman Police Department witnesses, correct?
With the exception of the beginning of the Chief Benton's testimony, I was present for both the entirety of Detective Campbell and Officer Stover's testimony.
Do you have anything new or different to add? You have filed a report. The report has been presented to the board. Is that report complete in your opinion?
Yes, I have no further information. Those officers actually saw more than I did. I left approximately 15 minutes after I arrived to transport the suspect back to the Whitman Police Station.
So unless counsel has anything for this witness, I suppose we'll simply take his report as it has been submitted.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Attorney Flanagan, do you have some people you'd like to talk to?
I do have witnesses. I'd like to speak to Mr. Lynham about the keeper of records and about the manager and about the rules and regs. If we want to do the same format, that's fine, or I can just start asking questions, that's fine too.
Sure. Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Well,
for me?
why don't you start?
I can just ask, yeah. So, Mr. Lyman, you indicated you have, you didn't indicate, you wrote a letter on March 31st, 2017 to Mr. O'Toole, is that correct?
Yes,
Do you recall writing that letter?
I recall writing and sending the letter in on
Would you like to look at it to review it?
particular recollection of its contents right now,
Would you like to look at it and review it?
certainly. Thank you.
This letter is in the packet, gentlemen.
Yes, it is.
He's gonna
Pardon me?
He's going to take 2 minutes to review, so we'll take a 2-minute break and then we'll just keep going.
Oh, that, do you need a few minutes to read it, Frank, to refresh your memory?
I'm going to ask him about another letter, so I can give him both letters, we can take a couple minutes. That makes more sense.
That wouldn't be a bad idea. Frank, why don't you take a few minutes to read both of them, and we all can stretch our legs. 5 minutes? So 5 minutes and 9, we'll start again.
Thank you. Yes, sir.